U.S. Coast Guard rescues 34 Haitian migrants on an uninhabited island near Puerto Rico.
Officials say workers found the migrants after seeing multiple campfires on Monito Island. More details on this later in the news. Good evening. I'm CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alagao Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Now for the headlines. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. returns home from ASEAN-EU summit in Brussels. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. certifies Maharlika Investment Fund as urgent. Senate plans to probe China's alleged bullying at West Philippine Sea. Peru declares state of emergency as protests intensify. And former U.S. President Donald Trump teases a big announcement. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. brings home more investments from his official trip in Brussels, Belgium. Randy Bernardino has the report.
President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. returns from his three-day visit to Brussels, Belgium, where he participated in the ASEAN-EU Commemorative Summit. Marcos, together with other Philippine delegation, arrived in Manila at 6:59 p.m. In an earlier statement, the Office of the Press Secretary said the president scored big from his visit. Malacanang reports that the president impressed EU businessmen for his commitment to initiatives on regional economic integration and for soldiering on despite catching a cold. In his arrival message, the president proudly shared the accomplishments of his attendance at the summit, bilateral meetings with other heads of state, and roundtable discussions with prospective investors. These include the 6 billion peso investments sealed with 2 multinational companies that would provide job opportunities for Filipinos.
During the commemorative summit, we had fruitful discussions with ASEAN and EU member states leaders. We exchanged views on what is in store for ASEAN-EU cooperation, particularly on areas of mutual interest and concerns such as connectivity, trade, digital transition, food security, climate change, geopolitics, amongst others. I was honored to deliver one of the opening remarks during the commemorative summit, in which I was proud to note the recent milestones in ASEAN-EU relations under the Philippines coordinatorship, the adoption of the ASEAN-EU Plan of Action for 2023 to 2027, and the successful conclusion of the first ever summit between ASEAN and EU leaders of our development and our economic growth, particularly in renewable energy, infrastructure, food security, climate change initiatives.
Marcos says this is a very significant development since the EU has turned its focus to the Asian-Pacific region as a driving force behind the new global economy. The president also reports that he has met with various leading ship owners all over Europe. Marcos says he was able to gather their commitment to help the Philippines hurdle the challenges in seafarer accreditation. He says that he has also invited the King of Belgium to visit the country again.
The King of Belgium, who fondly recalls his visit to the Philippines many years ago, and I invited His Majesty to visit the Philippines again. I also held bilateral meetings with my counterparts from the European Council, the European Commission, Estonia, Sweden, Czech Republic, the Netherlands, and Spain, with whom I identified many possible areas of further development and future partnerships.
Before leaving Brussels, the president participated in a joint news conference along with ASEAN Chair and Cambodian Prime Minister Hun Sen, European Council President Charles Michel, and European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen. Marcos reiterated the Philippines' position on the conflict between Russia and Ukraine. Some heads of state condemned Russia's invasion of Ukraine. Marcos also denied insinuations that the Philippines wants the European Union and the United States to compete with China. The president said the Philippines adheres to peace and understanding, notwithstanding the conflict happening in Ukraine.
About the competition between the United States and China, and if it's not what we want, believe me, we would rather not have these tensions in our part of the world. That is the last thing that we would like. And the Philippines, for our part, has taken an independent policy, and we absolutely refuse to go back to the situation of the Cold War, where we have to pick sides in terms of who the superpower is that we are aligned with. What we say is that, to put it very simply, is that in the Philippines, our foreign policy is the policy for peace and for the national interest. So foreign policy will always be guided by a commitment to peace and the pursuit of the national interest.
Before capping his trip in Belgium, the president met with Estonian Prime Minister Kaja Kallas, where they agreed to strengthen the two countries' cooperation on cybersecurity and e-commerce. PM Kallas invited Marcos and his delegation to visit Estonia to share strategies on digitalizing government processes and measures to combat cyber attacks. Randy Bernardino for Matanang Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The House of Representatives passed on second reading the proposed Maharlika Investment Fund. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. certified the bill as urgent, which gave way for the chamber to pass the bill. The president's message was read during the plenary session just a few minutes before the chamber approved House Bill 6608 on second reading through voice vote. Despite criticisms and oppositions, more members of the House of Representatives joined as co-authors of the controversial bill. Before adjournment on Wednesday for the holidays, 275 lawmakers signed as co-authors of the proposal. The refined MIF proposal removed the state pension government system or government service insurance system or GSIS and social security system or SSS as mandatory sources of seed money for Maharlika Fund. Instead, the seed money would be sourced from the investable fund of the Land Bank of the Philippines, Development Bank of the Philippines, and profits and dividends of the Bangko Sentral ng Pilipinas or BSP. President Ferdinand Marcos Jr. admitted that he broached the idea of a sovereign wealth fund, which he said would be beneficial to the country. The lawmakers believed that the MIF would spur the economy and other government projects for the Filipino people.
The Department of National Defense is concerned with the reported swarming of Chinese vessels in the West Philippine Sea. The increased presence of Chinese vessels was reported in November, following the visit of U.S. Vice President Kamala Harris, where she assured U.S. support for the country. Defense Secretary Officer in Charge Jose Faustino Jr. said the Chinese activity in the area violates Philippine sovereignty and jurisdiction, undermining regional peace and security. Faustino said President Ferdinand Marcos Jr.'s instruction is clear that the country will not surrender even a square inch of the territory to anyone. The defense chief assured that the Philippine Navy and the Philippine Coast Guard continue their routine maritime and aerial patrol in the disputed area.
The Senate plans to probe China's alleged bullying of the Philippine Naval Force at the West Philippine Sea. Senators said the incident should not be tolerated. Mayan Corvera with the story.
The Senate approved a resolution condemning the alleged bullying of China in the West Philippine Sea. Senators took note of the China's disregard for the country's protest against their action. In the last session of the Senate, before the chamber would go on a month-long holiday break, Senator Francis Tolentino showed his colleagues a video last November where the Chinese Coast Guard forcibly took a floating object recovered by the Philippine Navy personnel. In an earlier statement, the Chinese embassy in Manila denied the allegations and clarified that what happened is a friendly consultation. But according to the Department of Foreign Affairs, the statement is different from what happened based on the report of the authorities, which was the reason for filing a protest on the matter. Tolentino said the incident is a violation of 1982 UN Convention on the Law of the Sea or UNCLOS and the 2016 arbitral ruling.
The footage and reports clearly show that CCG assertively took the debris in the area well within the Philippine territory. These actions, along with the other gray zone activities, are slowly but surely eroding Philippine sovereignty in the West Philippine Sea and harming the country's strategic position.
The senators also furious and insist that China's bullying is unacceptable. The lawmaker said it is saddening that China is disregarding the entire protest lodged by the Philippines.
Ano pa po ang kailangan natin gawin para tigilan ng ating kaibigan na malaking bansa sa Asia ang kanilang pang-aabuso at hindi pagsunod sa isang maliwanag na ruling na dapat nilang respetuhin. Bawal ang bully sa mundo.
But,
I want them to hear it. That's why I am making my voice loud and clear.
Mr. President,
I'm not saying it was a bully. Bawal ang bully. Kung sino ang matamaan, silang masaktan.
The senators clarified that the country is not waging a war with China but only showing that bullying should not be tolerated.
Kung nakikinig yung mga Chinese ngayon, we are disgusted. We are disgusted and we are offended by what you are doing to our troops in the West Philippine Sea. Galit na kami. To tell you frankly, we are mad with what you are doing to our troops.
Tama yun. Puno-puno na po tayo. I think time for diplomacy sometimes is should be put aside and we should show our sincere anger and disgust on particularly this incident para matauhan sila kasi kung hindi, talagang mawawala na pati Palawan. Baka kuha na nila. Baka kunin na nila yung Palawan.
Yeah, Mr.
Palapit
President,
sila ng palapit sa atin.
We wanted to send this message to this bullying country that they will never be able to bully us.
The Senate Committee on Foreign Relations and National Defense would set an investigation on the incident. Mayan Corvera reporting for Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
The government failed to meet its vaccination target against COVID-19, falling short of its 90 million goal. Madeline Villar Moratillo reports.
The government will intensify its vaccination campaign against COVID-19. This is after the Department of Health, or DOH, admitted that vaccinations slowed down because many did not want to be inoculated. It's been 3 years since the government launched its vaccination program, but until now, it failed to reach its target to inoculate 90 million of the country's population. DOH data showed only 73.7 million of the population is fully vaccinated, while 21 million have booster doses. It is also reported that COVID-19 vaccine waste has reached 44 million doses. 24 million expired and 3.8 million wasted for other reasons, like natural disasters, temperature excursion, and underdosing. The DOH said another factor in the vaccine wastage is the decrease in the number of individuals going to vaccination sites. Net25 News asked some citizens if COVID-19 vaccination should be mandatory. Here are some reactions from the public.
Ma'am, gawin ng mandatory kasi para safe naman tayo lahat. Kasi yun yung inaano sa atin na dapat ay bakunado.
Much better po gawin mandatory para lahat po meron ng booster po lahat. Para hindi po nasasayang yung mga na-imbak na booster para po sa lahat. Doon po Voluntaryo pa rin, ma'am.
Conforme sa tao yung gusto magpabakuna sila, nasa kanila yung ayaw, bahala sila. Pero kami naman, aware kami magpabakuna.
Dapat ho ma-injectionan yung lahat ng mga tao.
Mandatory na po?
Opo, mandatory na po.
Bakit po?
Para ligtas tayo sa sakit.
According to some experts, vaccine wastage is unavoidable. However, infectious disease expert Dr. Ron Chinsolante said vaccine wastage is regrettable in the country's opportunity to strengthen its wall of immunity against the virus. On the matter of making vaccination mandatory, Solante said the idea is good but it's not applicable since inoculation is always voluntary. What the government could do is level up public awareness of the importance of the vaccine for protection against the virus. For his part, infectious disease expert Dr. Edsel Salvana said vaccination could not be made mandatory because right now the COVID-19 vaccine is allowed only under emergency use authorization. Madilim Villar Moratillo for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
The Social Security system launches a new savings scheme for its members. Paulo Ramos has the details.
The Social Security system has launched the Workers' Investment Savings Program, or WISP+. WISP+ is a new retirement savings scheme for SSS members. SSS President Michael Regino says the WISP+ program was based on the concept of work, invest, save, and prosper for members who voluntarily contribute. He added, WISP+ is a combination of savings and investments where members can participate even if their salary bracket is below 20,000 pesos. Originally, WISP was a mandatory provident fund from SSS members' contributions, mandated by Republic Act 11199 or the Social Security System Act of 2018 for retirement, disability, and death benefits. The program covered all private sector employees, self-employed individuals, overseas Filipino workers or OFWs, mandatory and voluntary members who do not have final claims with the SSS regular program, and employees with a monthly salary credit of 20,000 pesos or above.
So we created this program para all-inclusive sa lahat ng SSS members, makasali naman sila sa improved returns ng kanilang mga pera.
Meanwhile, Regino also announced that the 1% increase in the monthly SSS contribution from 13 to 14% would be effective January 2023. It would then be adjusted up to 15% in 2025 as mandated by the SSS Act.
Following the provisions of the law, to lengthen the fund life and to ensure that the system can provide the benefits of our members and pensioners in the decades to come.
Paulo Ramos for Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.
Absentee voting registration is now open in preparation for the 2025 Philippine national elections. The Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. released an advisory detailing what overseas voters need to do to secure eligibility. Rosel Feria reports.
Acceptance of applications to the overseas voters registration begins at the Philippine Embassy. This is in preparation for the 2025 Philippine national elections. Registration continues at the Philippine Embassy and in other Philippine Foreign Service posts until September 30, 2024. Registration is open from Monday to Friday from 9 a.m. to 3 p.m. except the holidays. An appointment is not required. To be qualified, you have to be a Philippine citizen abroad and not otherwise disqualified by law. You need to be at least 18 years of age on May 12, 2025. To register, an applicant must personally submit requirements to the Philippine Embassy in Washington, D.C. or in other Philippine Foreign Service posts. Requirements include a printed copy of the accomplished overseas voter registration form, the original and photocopy of a valid Philippine passport, and the original and a photocopy of proof of current Filipino citizenship, such as a green card, visa, notice of action, work permit, or dual citizenship. For more information on overseas voters registration, visit philippineenembassies-dc.org/overseas-absentee-voting. Rosel Feria, Washington, D.C., Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
Coming up, shallow 6.2 magnitude earthquake jolts Taiwan. Peru declares state of emergency over violent protests. And WHO eyes end to COVID and Mpox emergencies in 2023. Mata ng Agila International will be back after this short break.
This portion is brought to you by Final Match Security and Investigation Agency.
ilagay lang po yung...
No, Biro only. Sa Nest 25.
The news continues here on Mata ng Agila International. A 6.2 magnitude earthquake struck off Taiwan's eastern coast Thursday. Lighter aftershocks followed, reaching as far as Taipei. According to the Weather Bureau, the quake hit just after midday, 30 kilometers off the coast of Hualien County at a shallow depth of 6 kilometers. There were no immediate reports of damage or casualties. The head of the Weather Bureau Seismological Center said the shallow tremor was felt all over Taiwan. 8 aftershocks followed. More are expected in the next 3 days. Taiwan's subway and railway authorities both said trains were running at reduced speed, but services had not been halted. Taiwan is regularly hit by earthquakes as the island lies near the junction of two tectonic plates.
Peru declares a state of emergency over violent protests. Defense Minister Alberto Otarola says acts of violence, vandalism, and roadblocks prompted him to announce the 30-day measure Wednesday. Otarola says that the armed forces will have control of the whole territory. He says freedom of movement and assembly will be suspended. Otarola adds a nighttime curfew may also be implemented. Protests were sparked by the ousting of former President Pedro Castillo. Castillo was impeached and arrested after illegally trying to dissolve Congress and rule by decree. We will be right back after this short break. Please stay with us.
Lagiwat, also known as wild raspberries, are growing wild in Nunungan, Lanao del Norte. These berries are grown abundantly, allowing Nunungan to capitalize on it for agri-tourism. But there's more than just the raspberries. Nunungan is also fortunate to have lakes, caves, waterfalls, and mountain ranges that would surely excite tourists and adventure seekers. Head over to Nunungan through the father of its town, Honorable Mayor Marcos Mamay, here at Open for Business.
We believe in the saying that development is the new language of peace. So i-develop mo yung lugar, susunod na yung peace and order.
Open for business with Cesar Vallejos. Sunday, 9 p.m. Ngayong linggo sa Cine Throwback.
Sino mo kailangan dyan? Nakaganda nga ako. No, I don't think you understand me. I said, who is your Deo? What do you mean? Oh, yes, I mean.
Ngayong linggo, alas 12 ng tanghali. Dito lang sa Net 25.
Panalo tayo pag together. Walang talo pag together. Let's get together. Sa Net 25.
Lagay lang po yung
No, it's Biro only. Sa Net 25.
Tayo pag together. Walang talo pag together. Let's get together. Sa Net 25.
Magandang umaga po sa inyong lahat. Ako po si Alexa Miro.
Good morning, Alexa.
Super long overdue na. This Saturday, magluluto kami ng inyong mga Ilocano favorites. Only on Lutong Daza, 11 a.m. Saturdays here on Net 25.
Panalo tayo pag together. Walang talo pag together. Let's get together. Sa Net 25.
Sir, talagang maling
Nabasa ko na ito eh. Baka mag-bakel kayo. Baka kayo mga cameraman, pagtira natin dito, puro defocus kayo.
Pag sumakay ka na LRT papuntang Baclaran, sa papunta Usok.
Saan?
Wala namang Usok yun. Alam niyo na kung bakit tinatawag. 10 taong ko itong pinag-isipan. Huwag mong iiwanan ng getaway car. Huwag mong papatay ng makina. Huwag ka na mag-aircon at empty na.
Eh, naliligaw na ba sa'yo?
Ba't ka nagtatanong?
Ano meron?
Goto ka ba?
Bakit naman?
Kasi kakakita ko pa lang sa'yo, goto na ako.
Kaya ako pumunta dito kasi may naisip akong paraan para makapagsalita na sa'yo.
Ano naisip mo parang, Julie?
This portion is brought to you by Source Alliance.
Ousted Peruvian President Pedro Castillo will have to wait until later today to find out if he can be released from jail. Yesterday, a judge delayed a hearing until today to decide Castillo's fate. The former president was arrested last week and ordered to be held for 7 days. His release should have been Wednesday. But Judge Juan Checkley ordered Castillo to remain behind bars for another 48 hours. Meanwhile, Castillo's supporters continue to protest, demanding his release and new elections. 7 people have died and more than 200 have been injured in violent clashes between protesters and the police.
The World Health Organization hopes COVID-19 and Mpox won't be public health emergencies in 2023. Both diseases are said to end their most dangerous phase. WHO Chief Tedros Adhanom Ghebreyesus shares a chief lesson from the COVID-19 pandemic. Countries need to respond quickly to surprise outbreaks. On COVID-19, he says the weekly death toll is now around a fifth of what it was a year ago. Tedros reports that last week, less than 10,000 people lost their lives. He says, however, there is still a lot that all countries can do to save lives. He hopes that at some point next year, COVID-19 is no longer a global health emergency. He adds that COVID is here to stay and all countries need to manage it alongside other respiratory illnesses. On Mpox, formerly known as monkeypox, Tedros says the global outbreak had taken the world by surprise. More than 82,000 cases have been reported from 110 countries. The mortality rate has remained low with 65 deaths. Tedros reports that the number of weekly reported cases has declined more than 90% since the public health emergency in July. He says if the current trend continues, WHO will also be able to declare an end to this emergency next year.
Empty shelves line pharmacies in Beijing as fever and cold medications run low. COVID cases have soared in the Chinese capital after a nationwide loosening of the country's strict zero-COVID policy. Even though some residents are not infected, they still buy medicine to ensure safety from the virus. Other buyers, on the other hand, grapple with COVID or fever and need medication immediately. Moreover, caretakers of the elderly, children, and migrant workers need medicine to treat their ailing relatives. Beijing residents struggle with medical supplies, panicked about the country's worsening situation.
China's National Health Commissioner, NHC, will roll out the second COVID vaccine booster shots for the elderly and high-risk groups. Included are those with severe diseases and low immunity. The NHC reminds the public that the time gap between the first and second booster shots is 6 months. Reports say the quick vaccination approval is in line with China's adjusted COVID response. Health authorities add the willingness of the public to be inoculated has increased. From December 2 to 6, about 896,000 shots were administered across the Chinese mainland. From December 7 to 11, the first 4 days after restrictions were released, the number nearly quadrupled to 3.59 million shots. Experts believe that with the strict COVID curbs before, many residents thought it was unnecessary to get vaccinated.
China warns the United Kingdom of retaliation if it does not take steps to ensure its diplomats could work freely in the country. This comes after Beijing recalled envoys accused of assaulting a Hong Kong protester in Manchester. In his speech, Chinese Foreign Ministry spokesperson Wang Wenbin said China strongly urges the UK to fulfill its obligations under relevant international laws and bilateral consular agreements. The spokesperson stressed the UK must also abide by basic norms of international relations, immediately stop its political manipulation, and earnestly ensure the normal performance of duties of Chinese embassy officials in the UK. If not followed, China will respond with resolute and forceful measures.
1 person was killed Thursday and 9 more injured in Donetsk, and the most massive shelling since 2014 by Kyiv's forces. Donetsk Mayor Alexei Kolemzin said on social media 40 rockets were fired at civilians, destroying buildings and cars in the attack. Donetsk is the administrative city of Ukraine's eastern region, also called Donetsk. It is one of the areas Moscow claims to have annexed in September. Parts of the region have been controlled by Moscow-backed separatists since 2014. Russian proxy officials say the city center has been targeted in recent weeks. 6 civilians were killed in early December. Ukrainian authorities have said recently the fiercest frontline battles are being waged in the Donetsk region, near the city of Bakhmut. The governor of Donetsk said 2 civilians were killed and 4 more injured Wednesday in the Ukrainian-held parts of the region.
The United Nations votes to remove Iran from a women's rights body in response to Tehran's brutal crackdown of women-led protests. Following a campaign led by the United States, the UN Economic and Social Council voted to expel the Islamic Republic from the United Nations Commission on the Status of Women. This is for the remainder of its 2022-2026 term. 29 countries voted for expulsion, 8 countries against, and 16 abstained. A simple majority was needed to adopt the move proposed by the United States. The resolution says it strips Iran of its membership in the Commission with immediate effect. The text says Iranian leadership continuously undermines and increasingly suppresses the human rights of women and girls. These include the right to freedom of expression and opinion, often with the use of excessive force. The Commission is the principal global intergovernmental body exclusively dedicated to promote gender equality and women empowerment. In early November, Vice President Kamala Harris said the U.S. would work with other nations to oust Iran from the Commission. Former Secretary of State Hillary Clinton also campaigned for the move. Iran accused Washington of pressuring countries ahead of the vote.
Former U.S. President posts on Truth Social that he will make a big announcement. Trump claims America needs a new superhero. He's dressed as one in the Truth Social video post with lasers coming out of his eyes. 1 week after the November midterm elections, Trump made a major announcement.
America needs a superhero.
1 week after the November midterm elections, Trump made a major announcement, his intention to run for president in 2024. Many in his own party thought this was a little premature. Ron DeSantis, governor of Florida, has a 52% to 38% advantage over Trump among Republican voters in a poll by the Wall Street Journal.
The U.S. Coast Guard rescues 34 Haitian migrants stranded on an uninhabited island. They are 26 men, 7 women, and 1 child, abandoned on an island near Puerto Rico by human smugglers. The discovery came as Puerto Rican workers noticed several campfires on Monito Island. The Coast Guard rescued the migrants Monday and turned them over to Border Patrol authorities. According to one report, the migrants had been on the island for 5 days before they were discovered. Later in the news, EU leaders and ASEAN member states sign trade agreement. U.S. signs a regional compact with Benin and Niger.
Honored guest.
And UK research says ketamine therapy can curb alcoholism. Stay tuned. Mata ng Agila International will be right back.
Alam namin ang iyong pagsisikap. Dama namin ang iyong mga sakripisyo. Kita namin ang pagharap mo sa bawat pagsubok. Kaya sa kabila ng mga hamon ng buhay, nandito kami para umalalay. Kasi katulad mo, gusto rin namin ang magandang bukas para sa kanya. Hatid namin ang dekalidad na edukasyon at makabagong pasilidad sa abot kayang halaga. Kaya huwag ka na mangamba. Sasamahan ka namin tuparin ang mga pangarap niya. Maaasahan mong sulit dito ang mga pinagsikapan mo. Sa aming mga makabagong pasilidad at sistema ng edukasyon. Mailalabas natin ang aking talino at mga kakayahan niya. Kahit sa munting halaga, makakasiguro ka na makakasabay siya sa mabilis na pag-ikot ng mundo. Sa New Era, karamay mo kami sa bawat hamon. Kaagapay mo kami sa bawat hakbang. Kasama mo kami sa bawat ngiti at tagumpay.
Leaders of the European Union and ASEAN member states meet at the EU-ASEAN Commemorative Summit in Brussels, Belgium. They signed a trade agreement designed to bolster ties in the face of the Ukraine war and challenges from China. The EU vows billions of dollars of investments in Southeast Asia. The Union bills its first full summit with ASEAN as a chance to push trade relations with the region's fast-growing economies. European Commission President Ursula von der Leyen says there might be many miles that divide the EU and Southeast Asian nations, but there are much more values that unite them.
The United States signs a regional compact with the governments of Niger and Benin during a ceremony of the U.S.-Africa Business Forum in Washington. A U.S. government agency, Millennium Challenge Corporation, says the Benin-Niger Regional Transport Compact includes grants of $202 million for Benin and $302 million for Niger. U.S. Secretary of State Antony Blinken says the deal is a historic step for the U.S. relationship with two important partners.
One of the tremendous opportunities in Africa, but that extends beyond Africa, is building connectivity within Africa. As we've seen over the years, Africa has more trade with countries outside of Africa than it does within Africa itself. That's not normal. This connectivity will help change that.
New evidence supports the safety and effectiveness of the Jynneos Mpox vaccine. For best protection, the CDC says everyone eligible for Mpox vaccination should receive the complete two-dose series. Frances Francisco has the details.
New data released recently in the Centers for Disease Control and Prevention's Morbidity and Mortality weekly report provided additional evidence to support that vaccinations with the Jynneos Mpox vaccine is safe. The data also suggests that it reduces the risk for getting the disease. CDC recommends vaccinations for people at risk for getting Mpox. The first report looks at vaccine safety data among children and adults. CDC says the report finds no major vaccine safety concerns after nearly 1 million Jynneos doses were administered. Common adverse health events reported were consistent with studies before the vaccine was licensed. This includes injection site redness, swelling, or pain, and dizziness. The second report finds rates of Mpox illness in unvaccinated people were 10 times higher compared to those who had received both doses of the Jynneos vaccine. The health agency says these findings provide additional evidence supporting the protective effect of the vaccination. CDC says although Mpox cases are decreasing, so is public concern. Mpox response incident manager Jonathan Merman says with a safe, effective vaccine available, this is the chance to turn the page and finish strong. CDC encourages everyone who is eligible for Mpox vaccination to receive the complete two-doses series for best protection. Frances Francisco, Seattle, Washington, Mata ng Agila International, trusted, connected, on point.
A new trial offers heavy drinkers ketamine to wean them off alcohol. The Phase 3 trial costs £2.4 million. A study suggests it is safe and tolerable. Professor Celia Morgan of the University of Exeter leads the new trial. She says people with alcohol problems find it difficult to engage with psychological interventions. Ketamine could help. In the trial, 87% of the test subjects received small doses of ketamine and underwent therapy. Morgan says the tested alcoholics stayed off the drink for 6 months. But she points out ketamine is not the sole deterrent. Therapy works hand in hand. She adds that the Phase 3 trial will have safe, carefully controlled conditions. The National Health Service reports that alcohol-related problems cost £3.5 billion a year, and 2 million adults suffer serious alcoholism.
4 migrants died after their boat capsized in freezing conditions overnight in the English Channel. A fishing boat spotted the sinking vessel early in the morning. The crew pulled 31 people from the water and alerted authorities who continue their search. They, however, no longer believe they will find any more survivors. Founding member of Channel Rescue Kay Marsh says the tragedy is unfortunate and could have been avoided.
It's absolutely heartbreaking. Again, we're mourning the loss of people's lives in the Channel just 13 months after the last major incident. So much has been said in this last year around migration, so many plans and policies, but very little has actually happened, as we've seen today. It's just heartbreaking and completely avoidable. And probably not. No, there's been an awful lot of talk, as I said, but we need action. We need actual things to happen. In his statement yesterday, the PM touched very briefly and very vaguely on new safe legal routes to asylum in the UK, but with no solid plan. So we need to know what that's going to look like and when those routes are going to be available, because that's the only way we stop the small boat crossings.
Thailand's royal palace says the king's eldest daughter collapsed from a heart condition. Princess Bajrakiti Yabha suddenly lost consciousness while training her dogs northeast of Bangkok. The palace says that a helicopter airlifted her to a nearby hospital. Coming right up, Apple to allow alternative app stores ahead of EU laws. Henry Cavill confirms Superman exit. And Mali's world-beating non-athletes return home. More international news when Mata ng Agila International returns.
Dito ang inyong sumbong, siguradong may respondeng katapat. Hindi nagdadalawang isip na tumulong sino man ang nangangailangan. Kababayan natin sa Singapore na may sakit na pancreatic cancer, binisita ng responde. At sa akin pong pagdating doon, tumagsang tulong hindi lamang mula sa ating mga kapwa Pilipino, pero maging mga taga-ibang bansa.
Pagod na po kami mag-asawa. Kasi hindi namin, walang nakakaalam po. Kami lang pong mag-asawa. Wala pong acceptance. Sobrang, nung sinabi sa amin noon, talagang nag-collapse po talaga yung world namin. Kasi talagang ang daming tanong na.
Mapapanood nyo kami sa mga sumusunod na mga channels. Sabado, alas 6 hanggang alas 7 ng gabi. Ito ang Responde, Mata ng Mamamayan.
Sir, alam nyo nabasa ko na ito eh. Baka mag-bakel kayo. Baka kayo mga cameraman, pagtira natin dito, puro defocus kayo. Gusto makay ka na LRT papuntang Baclaran, sa papunta usok. Saan? Wala namang usok yun. Alam niyo na kung bakit ito natawag. 10 taong ko itong pinag-isipan. Huwag mong iiwanan ng getaway car. Huwag mong papatay ng makina. Huwag ka na mag-aircon at empty na.
Apple will reportedly introduce alternative App Store options via side loading in Europe. This is to comply with strict EU requirements. Sources familiar with the matter claim the App Store, as well as Apple's mandatory 30% commission, can be sidelined. Changes will be available only in Europe due to the Digital Markets Act. But sources say these changes may set a precedent for other regions. Apple argues that forcing them to open up their closed technology could seriously affect security and privacy. But the EU insists the owner of a smartphone should have the freedom to use other platforms.
The U.S. Senate unanimously passed a bill banning government employees from installing TikTok on government devices. The vote is the latest action from U.S. lawmakers targeting the Chinese-owned social media app amid fears it is a spy tool against Americans. According to the bill's sponsor, Republican Senator Josh Hawley, TikTok is a major security risk to the United States. Meanwhile, Senator Marco Rubio proposed a bill that aims to eliminate TikTok completely and its Chinese parent company ByteDance in the U.S. Rubio cited TikTok's unique ability to monitor more than 1 billion users worldwide, including nearly two-thirds of American teenagers, jeopardizing the safety of the U.S.
Right-team football fans clashed with police in Europe last night following France's defeat of Morocco in the World Cup. About 1,000 fans in Brussels, Belgium, threw fireworks and other debris at police clad in riot gear. They lit garbage on fire and torched a couple of cars. Police responded with water cannons and tear gas to disperse the crowd. Meanwhile, in Paris, police chased rowdy fans who rioted near the Champs-Élysées, and at least 2 people were arrested.
President Emmanuel Macron firmly stands by his decision to visit Qatar and support France's World Cup team, despite allegations of corruption linked to the European Parliament. On Wednesday night, Macron was in Qatar to watch France's semi-final victory over Morocco before flying to Brussels to attend the EU summit in Brussels. Belgian police are investigating allegations Qatar paid bribes to European politicians who were arrested and charged with corruption. Meanwhile, Qatar denies any wrongdoing. Macron says he is totally comfortable visiting Qatar in order to back the French team. 4 years ago, he supported the team in Russia. On Sunday, Macron is set to return to Qatar to watch France play against Argentina in the World Cup final.
Sad news for fans of Henry Cavill and Superman. In an Instagram post, the actor reveals he is not returning as Superman in future DCEU films. He says his turn to wear the red cape has passed, but what Superman stands for never will. He also confirms his exit as Superman is part of new creative plans for the superhero franchise, spearheaded by co-heads of DC Studios, James Gunn and Peter Safran. The British actor admits breaking the news is not the easiest, but he respects the executive's decision. He also sends love to his fans. His announcement comes a week after Warner Brothers decided to shelve Gal Gadot's Wonder Woman 3.
Writer and director James Gunn confirms meeting with Ben Affleck. The actor formerly played Batman in the DCEU franchise. Gunn says Affleck wants to direct a film for DC. Now they are looking for the right project for him to work on. Meanwhile, Gunn also confirms that Henry Cavill will not be part of the new Superman film DC Studios is planning to make. News sources say the new Superman film will focus on his life as a cub reporter working in Metropolis, where he meets Lois Lane.
A Malian mother has 9 children, 5 girls and 4 boys, all born in May 2021 in Morocco. They returned to Bamako and are welcomed by the Minister of Health, joyful to see them all healthy. Halima C was a young woman from the northern city of Timbuktu who gave birth to 9 babies in Casablanca. The Mali government flew her to the city's Ain Borha clinic to handle the multiple births. With the help of 10 doctors and 25 paramedics, all babies were delivered safely through cesarean section. The babies weighed between 500 grams and 1 kilogram. Doctors advised that they stay in Morocco under the care of specialists. The world record holder for having the most live births is 33-year-old American Nadia Suleiman. Nicknamed the Octomom, she claimed the title in 2009 for birthing 8 children. Nevertheless, Health Minister Diminatu Sangare is proud of having the nanoplets, the first for the country and a source of pride. That's a lot of work from the mom.
It is quite so. Oh my goodness.
I'm so
And
scared.
to help you go through this week, it's Thursday. Not quite the weekend yet. Here's a quote from Washington Irving, an American short story writer. Little minds are tamed and subdued by misfortune, but great minds rise above it.
maybe not just little minds, because that comes with heart as well, right? If you are easily broken by, the challenges of what you want to do, it just derails your plans.
That's right. And remember, we talked about this before, that you need to be strong here and also here.
Strong mind, strong heart, strong will.
Right.
And that's a wrap for tonight's news. Catch the latest updates on our social media channels. I am CJ Hero.
And I am Nina Richie Alago Flores. This is Mata ng Agila International. Trusted, connected, on point.